Welcome to Jamestown, Virginia. This part of our trip, we went both to Jamestown Settlement and the actual Jamestown Fort site. We started our adventure here at the settlement. The settlement is a living history museum which was created in 1957 for the celebration of the founding of Jamestown in 1607. We first went through Paspahegh, probably pronounced that incorrectly, town. It is the American Indians that were on the land when the English arrived and set up the colony. This shows their huts, their way of life, and how they did a lot of different things. Their huts were quite ingenious. They used green, small saplings that they could bend to form the structure of the huts, and then they used woven grass mats, or wicker mats, to cover it and insulate it. The town was a neat display. They had several people dressed up for the part that would talk to you about how they did different things and their way of life. And it was just a neat place to visit, and seeing how the American Indians lived back in that time. Then we went out to the ships. These are the original 3 ships that came out for the original settlement. This one's the Susan Constant. It was the biggest of the 3, and it was the only one that was open for us to walk through while we were there. Unfortunately, it's a common theme, but because of COVID, the other 2 were closed down. And these are based off of the best descriptions from any type of historical document that could be found, and eyewitness accounts, etc., of what the ships were like. And then these were actually built in Virginia and brought down here in a past celebration for the anniversary of the Jamestown Settlement. It is interesting to me to see the size of these ships. 2 of these ships for sure, if not all 3 of them, are smaller than the Mayflower. And these ships crossed the ocean. Just quite amazing to see the cooking apparatus through the brickwork there. And these beds were so short. There's no way you could stretch out on these beds. You would have to curl up, bring your knees towards your chest just to fit in them. And the Susan Constant was supposed to have approximately 71 passengers, including John Smith. And you walk around the ship, and how in the world did 70 people live, work, eat, and just conduct daily life in such a small area? Because my guess is the weather was not just wonderful the whole way across. It was fun walking through and seeing all the different aspects to it. You know, back in those days, even merchant ships had enough cannons to protect themselves, and the different storage levels, and this one, like the Mayflower, it's got a steering stick, not a steering wheel, because they didn't have wheels for them back then. There's the steering stick. And my guess is this would be the, quote, officer's quarters, because it's more of the command deck and The captain's quarters are right behind here. We'll see those soon. Think about taking this small wooden boat across the Atlantic Ocean. No GPS, no radios, no sat nav, nothing. Simply the stars, a compass, and a crew that could handle a sail ship. So the Discovery, it was probably like the middle size ship, but the interesting part about the Discovery is it was actually left behind, where the Susan Constant and the Godspeed, the next one we'll see, actually returned to England. They left the Discovery behind so that it could explore the area. There's about 100 men that were left behind on the initial voyage in 1607, and it took approximately 40 crew members to sail those two other ships back to England. Quite a voyage when you actually look at the traveling they did to get here. It wasn't in a straight line. And it definitely took a while. And here at the Jamestown Settlement, they also have a reproduction of the fort. The fort is to show approximately the 1610 to 1614 James Fort area. And it's pretty close to what they've actually found at the site where the actual fort had been. So here they've got various different buildings set up to show the barracks, the armory, just all the different aspects, the forge, all the different things they would have on site, and the living quarters. Interesting to see all the different buildings they could have had, and what it would have kind of been like back in the day. And this blacksmith is showing how they made nails. In that short period of time, he made a single nail on the blacksmith, and he was saying that an experienced blacksmith back in the day could have put out 2 or 3 nails in the time it took him to do one. It was still neat to see. And it would have been common to see the individual armor in each person's house. And it was also compelling to see the different quality of furniture. Obviously, this room would have been owned by someone of higher stature than a lot of the other places we walked through, with the elaborate woodwork, the fancy carved desks. Even the chairs and the nightstands in the rooms were very, very nice. Curtains around the bed, definitely not in everybody's room. And this is a reproduction of the church. This is the church that, had it been in the original Jamestown site, and been the original church, is where Pocahontas, daughter of Powhatan, married John Rolfe in 1614. There were some old journals that had been discovered that gave descriptions of how the church was, and including the pulpit and the pews and the altar up front. And the fort was set up in a triangle shape, and in each corner of the triangle was a round guard area where they could have set up cannons for fort defenses. Because the local American Indians at first did not get along completely with the English, and there were several skirmishes and issues between the two groups. So the English fortified the fort, brought their stuff inside, and kept it that way to give a little better defenses against the American Indians in the area. From the settlement, we took about a 5-minute drive, about 1.5 miles down the road to the actual Jamestown Settlement. They did some excavations in 1994 and were actually able to find, just based on different colors of the soil that they were digging through, they were able to show where the fort's wooden posts had been set up for the outside walls. The memorial church was actually built in 1907 for the 300th celebration of Jamestown, but that tower on the end of the church, it dates back to the 1600s. But they were able to find a lot of where the fort walls were and where a lot of the original buildings were. And this is just a few of the grave sites found. There's several others that were found during later excavations in the late 90s, early 2000s that had no markers on them. The original settlement started in 1607, and the first couple of years were tough. Between famine, disease, and conflict, it almost ended the settlement. It wasn't until new arrivals arrived in 1610, bringing about 100 more settlers and supplies, that kept the settlement alive. The wooden frame you see inside is believed to have been the construction method of the original church before the one was rebuilt in 1907. The whole idea of the Virginia Company coming over here they believed they were going to find gold, silver, precious gems, all of that kind of stuff in this new land. And of course they didn't. When the two ships went back to England and reported to the king, they really didn't have a lot with them to show. Later down the road, the settlement learned that tobacco was a very lucrative crop that they could grow here, and so tobacco became a really big thing. What I really liked about the actual Jamestown site is because the excavations they started doing in the late 90s, they were able to find not only where the walls had been, but where a lot of the buildings were, and based on the size and descriptions from journals and other stuff, they were able to find a lot of different buildings and knew what they were. One thing we weren't able to do is right next to Jamestown is Newtown, where in the 1620s the settlement was outgrowing the fort and was expanding, and Newtown was built right next to it. And Jamestown remained the capital of Virginia until 1699 when it was moved to Williamsburg. Here's some of the graves they found during excavations, and they marked each one with a cross. It was amazing those first few years that through famine, disease, and through battles, at one point like 25% of the entire settlement was killed in like one single year. Just amazing the hardships they went through trying to make a life here in the new country. And we went to the museum here on the site and in the visitor center, and it was quite informative. Had a lot of neat artifacts and really good displays explaining things in detail. It's amazing how they would create their dugout canoes by burning the inside to soften the wood up so it was easier to shape into the final canoe shape. A lot of these plaques talk about the hardships that the first settlers had and how difficult it was to actually make things work here in the New World. And me and my daughter love old chests like that, and it was really neat to see all that complicated mechanisms to lock that top door. And this cannon is an actual 1600s cannon. The date on it is not 100% known. They can decipher that it says 1620, but they can't figure out the last number. So that cannon was made in the 1620s. Of course, the carriage is rebuilt and new, but really neat to see an actual authentic cannon like that. And stay tuned for our next couple videos, because we're going to be going to Colonial Williamsburg and to Yorktown as well. A lot of fun, a lot of neat things to see in this part of the country.